everybody, and welcome to the new recording of the history of the Blackpool Pleasure Beach. The Blackpool Pleasure Beach can be found on the northwest coast of the United Kingdom and is commonly known as one of the most popular resorts in the United Kingdom, if not across Europe. With over 100 years of history and rides behind it, the Pleasure Beach has a very fond place in a lot of people's hearts, and hopefully in this video we'll show how far the park has come from its early beginnings back in 1896 right up to modern day 2020, where we'll look at its range of modern coasters, vintage coasters, and the way the park has become one of the best parks across Europe. So let's travel back in time to 1896 when it all began, down there on the beach in Blackpool with a man called William George Bean. So the Pleasure Beach was founded in 1896 by William George Bean after he'd failed in his attempt to become an advertising man in New York's Madison Avenue. He returned to the United Kingdom in 1897 and opened two separate amusement parks, one in Great Yarmouth and one in Blackpool opposite the tram terminus. The park in Great Yarmouth failed to generate much interest, so Bean moved full-time to Blackpool towards the end of the century. It would be in 1903 when Bean would join up with a local businessman named John Outhwaite. Between them they purchased 30 acres of land known as the Watson Estate, which was used to expand the amusement park in Blackpool. The original Pleasure Beach was built on the sand dunes along the promenade and consisted of a few roundabouts, a bicycle railway and several gypsy stalls. Bean and Outhwaite decided it was time to expand their business after visiting Coney Island out in the United States. Also, they used a small static fairground in London's Earls Court for inspiration. It was in 1904 when the Pleasure Beach would add Sir Hiram Maxim's captive flying machine ride, a rotary swing ride designed by the British inventor of the same name. The inventor opened Sir Hiram Maxim's captive flying machines at a handful of amusement parks across England in 1904, and they were an instant hit. The ride itself consists of rocket-shaped passenger cars hanging from a central armature which would spin, causing the cars to sway out at a pendulous angle, simulating flight. Maxim wanted to add rudders and aerofoils that would allow the riders to have a degree of control over the swinging cars, but this was deemed unsafe, which led to the inventor's disgust with the amusement business as a whole. Maxim felt that the toothless design had turned his grand idea into simply a glorified merry-go-round. Yet 116 years later, the ride is still in operation at the Pleasure Beach and is still one of the most popular rides at the park. And now with its Grade 1 listed protection, the ride should be at the park for many more years to come. So perhaps Sir Hiram Maxim's disappointment would be slightly less now, knowing that his ride was still running today and going strong. A year later in 1905, they would add a mill chute water ride that was named the River Caves of the World. The ride is still in operation today at the theme park and is still very popular amongst visitors, which once again shows what a good job they did of the original engineering of this ride. In 1907, the Pleasure Beach would open its first wooden roller coaster, which was known as the Scenic Railway. It was during this time that the park began to trade under the name Blackpool Pleasure Beach. The Scenic Railway was built at the beach at the cost of £20,000, providing a ride over a mile long which went twice around the track at speeds of up to 40 miles per hour. Over the next few years, the Pleasure Beach would expand at an alarming rate. It would include openings of the rides the Velvet Coaster, a roller coaster that had been designed by William Homer Strickler, the House of Nonsense, the Joy Wheel, and the Whip. Unfortunately, these rides would be the last ones that John Outhwaite would have any part of, as unfortunately he died in 1911 and left most his remaining business to Bean.
During the First World War and following the First World War, investment in the park would cease due to the difficulty of exporting rides from the United States, and the next investment in the park would not come until 1922. And that investment would come in the shape of the Virginia Reel, and Noah's Ark, which would both open in this year.
Despite the lack of investment over these years, profits at the Pleasure Beach soared, and the company was noted as being one of the most prolific employers in the northwest of England.
Further into 1920, William Bean would invest in the casino building, a triple-tiered Art Deco building designed by a local architect
named Joseph Emberton.
The exterior of the building featured a white ferroconcrete facade with white electric lighting, and the interior housed a billiard hall, a cinema, a restaurant, and a gift shop. In 1923, land was reclaimed from the Blackpool seafront, and it was during this period that the Pleasure Beach would move to its 42-acre current location along the promenade. The same year, William Bean brought in John Miller to design and build the Big Dipper roller coaster.
John A. Miller was considered the Thomas Edison of the roller coaster world. He built his first roller coaster at 19 years old, and for more than 30 years he designed and built roller coasters all over the world, many of which are still used today. Miller was on the forefront of rider safety, and he designed the ratchet safety mechanism and the under-friction wheels. The Big Dipper would open on the 23rd of August in 1923 and was a wooden out and back roller coaster, and it would keep this setup right up to 1936, when the ride was extended by Charlie Page and Joe Emberton, where they added arches over the south entrance of the park and additional drops. In 2010, the ride would get further refurbishment, resulting from an accident in August 2009. The iconic Big Dipper station received a £500,000 upgrade in time for the 2010 season. The refurbishment had been sympathetic to the original design of the ride station, which dated back to the 1930s. A new fountain had been added, the track was refurbished, and the trains were repaired and had been repainted dark blue with new panels fitted on the exterior. This was Bean's final investment before he died of pneumonia in 1929, having spent 33 years shaping and developing what would become one of the most significant amusement parks in the world. Following William Bean's death, his daughter and only daughter Lillian Doris Bean would inherit the Pleasure Beach business. Lillian Doris Bean married Leonard Thompson, an Oxford natural science graduate and businessman, in 1928. The couple would live in London, where Leonard worked at a Swedish match company. However, upon hearing of William Bean's death, the couple returned to Blackpool, where decisions regarding the future running of the Pleasure Beach were in discussion. Leonard, up till this point, had not had any active involvement with the Pleasure Beach whatsoever. However, by mutual agreement with his wife, it was agreed that Leonard Thompson would take over the running of the Pleasure Beach and have full responsibility for all its affairs. His first move was to appoint Oscar Hayworth as general manager and George Palmer as chairman of the company. Over the next 2 years, Thompson worked with the Outhwaites to expand the business further, starting with the construction of the ghost train, which would open in 1930. The ghost train at Blackpool Pleasure Beach opened in 1930 and was designed by Joseph Emberton. It's commonly noted as the first real ghost train in the world and the first to use the name of ghost train. It's one of the few ghost trains now left in the United Kingdom that isn't portable. The ghost train at Blackpool Pleasure Beach is said to have its own actual ghost in the name of Cloggy. It's said that Cloggy died between 20 and 30 years ago and gets his name because clogs were his choice of footwear. Staff have said you can hear Cloggy at night walking in there, and people have also claimed to be touched on the ghost train by the ghost. Unfortunately, it's one of the last few remaining ghost trains left in the United Kingdom that's not portable. In fact, the Pleasure Beach has had its own episode on the popular TV show Most Haunted, as it has a number of spirits in the park. As well as Cloggy on the ghost train, it is also said that the gift shop beneath Sir Hiram Maxim's flying machines is haunted by a small girl and a poltergeist, and that things move themselves overnight and they find them in completely different spots. It's also said that the Old Star pub, where the now Boulevard Hotel is, there had been sightings and shadows of a male figure in the cellar, living accommodation, and the Morgan and Griffin bars. He's said to bear a resemblance to Karl Marx, who himself bears a resemblance to Hiram Maxim. In 1931, the remaining Outhwaite family sold their shares in the park to the Thompsons, who would now have complete control and ownership of the business. The following year, Watson Road was built underneath the park, which resulted in the closure of the Velvet Coaster. Although many parts from the Velvet Coaster would go into the making of Roller Coaster, which would later become Nickelodeon Streak, and also the UK pub chain Wetherspoons would open a pub close to the Pleasure Beach called the Velvet Coaster, which was loosely themed about the roller coaster and the park in general, and would also include some of the train's old cars.
Leonard Thompson's next major investment was the construction of the Funhouse in 1934 and the Grand National roller coaster, a Mobius loop wooden coaster built by celebrated coaster designer Charles Page in 1935. Page had designed numerous other rides at the Pleasure Beach, including the original roller coaster, another wooden coaster that was constructed on the site of the Velvet Coaster in 1933. The success of Page's wooden coasters resulted in a complete reprofiling of the Big Dipper in 1936, which was extended towards the southwesterly side of the park, and during this time Leonard Thompson hired Joseph Emberton, an award-winning architect who was brought in to redesign the architectural style of the Pleasure Beach rides and the buildings. He worked on the casino building, Noah's Ark and the Ice Dome, a 2,000-seat ice rink. Emberton continued to design for the Pleasure Beach up to his death in 1956. Investments in the Pleasure Beach would steadily decrease during the Second World War. However, the park remained open to offer the British public some solace during the war years. The park returned to prominence between 1958 and 1961, when the Wild Mouse, the Derby Racer, and the Alice in Wonderland rides would open.
So we'll let you know how it is.
Over the next few years, the scale of investment would increase, with the world's longest log flume opening in 1967, and the gold mine opening 4 years later. The Walt Disney Company visited the park earlier in the decade, and Pleasure Beach was one of the few parks which became the basis for the first Disneyland Park in Anaheim, California. Walt Disney formed a friendship with Leonard Thompson, and the two would regularly inspire one another when developing their respective parks. Some of the other notable rides that were brought to the park during Leonard Thompson's time would be Blue Flyer, a children's wooden coaster composed of bunny hills and a tunnel, which would open in 1934. Roller coaster, which was a classic wooden coaster made up of parts of the former Velvet Coaster, which would open in 1933. Grand Prix, which was an electrical powered car ride which opened in 1960 and is still at the park today. Turtle Chase, which would open in 1935 but unfortunately close in the year 2004. Sidewinder, a dive bomber ride which would open in 1939 but close in 1961. And the Pleasure Beach Express, which opened in 1934 and still runs to this day, taking passengers around the trip around the outskirts of the park through multiple scenery including wildlife, a jungle and a Jurassic era. After many successful years as the managing director of the Pleasure Beach, Leonard Thompson would unfortunately die in 1976, having ran the family business for 47 years. Following his death, Doris Thompson was appointed chairman of the business, and their only son, Jeffrey Thompson, inherited his father's role and became the new managing director of the Pleasure Beach. William Jeffrey Thompson was born in Manchester in 1936. He spent most of his early working life working for the New Era laundries in London, before returning to the family business as head of catering at the casino building. He married his wife, Barbara Thompson, in 1962, and shortly afterwards they had 3 children, Amanda, Nicholas and Fiona. Jeffrey would invest millions of pounds developing the business, carrying further his father's legacy, which was for the pleasure beach to always be at the forefront of global amusement parks. He hired Keith Ingram to make extensive alterations to the casino building, which was relaunched as the Wonderful World building, although since then the building has reverted back to its original name. Thompson's reign over Blackpool Pleasure Beach saw the opening of rides Steeplechase, Avalanche, Revolution, Ice Blast the Ride, but Geoffrey Thompson's most notable investment would be the Big One roller coaster, which would open in 1994. Geoffrey Thompson's final ride that he would oversee would be Valhalla, which opened in the year 2000. But it wasn't just within the Pleasure Beach where Geoffrey Thompson would excel. He was actively involved in promoting tourism in the northwest of England. He sat on almost all of the relevant agencies, including the English Tourist Board and the British Association of Leisure Parks, Piers and Attractions. He was awarded the OBE status along with his mother for their contribution to tourism in 1986. In the following years, Pleasure Beach would include Spin Doctor, which would open in the year 2002, and they would also invest in the park's first hotel, the Big Blue Hotel, in the year 2003. They also installed Bling as the Aero Star-shaped thrill ride the following year in 2004. "2004 would turn out to be a bad year for the Pleasure Beach. This would start in May when the famous Grand National ride would catch fire. The fire would break out in the queuing station of the ride, and the tracks and ride cars were destroyed near the ticket station. Firefighters had to take water from Valhalla and the river caves to put the flames out. And then in the next month, the Pleasure Beach would lose two of its biggest benefactors. Unfortunately, Geoffrey Thompson would die of a heart attack at the Pleasure Beach on the 12th of June in 2004 while attending a party to celebrate his daughter's wedding. And then unfortunately, 9 days later on the 23rd of June, the park would lose Doris Thompson on the date of her son's funeral. Following the passing of Doris and Geoffrey Thompson, Geoffrey Thompson's daughter Amanda Thompson would take over the day-to-day running of the park. Her brother Nicholas Thompson would become the deputy managing director, and her younger sister Fiona Thompson would become a senior company director. Amanda Thompson had previously risen to prominence as the founder and president of Stageworks Worldwide Productions, which produced numerous high-profile shows at both the Pleasure Beach and across the world. And during Amanda's reign, the park has seen vast redevelopment, including the introduction of mass branding, as well as the removal of numerous rides including the Whip, Space Invaders, Turtle Chase, Spin Doctor,
Tom! Tom! Smile for the camera! You and Chelsea weighing it down again.
Trauma Towers, Noah's Ark, Black Hole, Bling, and Super Bowl. In 2005, the park would close the Pleasure Beach's log flume drenched falls, and the result of this meant the introduction of Infusion. Infusion was the park's first new roller coaster for 13 years and was relocated from Pleasureland in Southport, where it had operated under the name Traumatizer since 1999. Infusion would be built on the site of the old log flume.
Infusion looks quite nice, all lit up. It might be a hen banger, but it still looks a good ride. So that was Infusion.
In 2009, for the first time in the park's history, visitors would be charged an entrance fee. Initially, the charge was £5. If visitors wished to use any other attractions, from this point on they would have to pay extra. In 2011, the Thompson family signed a contract with Viacom, owners of the American-based Nickelodeon children's channel. The deal meant the park would open a brand new area called Nickelodeon Land, a 12-acre theme park situated within the main park. Nickelodeon Land was a £10 million redevelopment of the park's previous children's area, Beaver Creek, which had closed in 2010. Notable changes included a complete retheme of the roller coaster, which would reopen under a new alias, Nickelodeon Streak. The formerly defunct Space Invaders 2 building would now be occupied by a large pizza restaurant, and many of the other rides were either replaced or repainted or renamed to represent the Nickelodeon brand. In 2013, the park would work alongside Aardman Animations, the owners of the Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep brands, who introduced Wallace and Gromit's Thrill-O-Matic, a dark ride which would replace the gold mine.
Porridge today, lad. Tuesday. Oh, where'd you get that from? Oh, that's my machine. I've got places ready. EV6000 now. Capable of over 125 RPM. That's rapid turn.
And in 2015, the park would team up with the Royal Air Force to open the Red Arrow Sky Force, a thrill ride based on the famous aerobatic team.
Wasn't working on opening day, but it is today. having difficulty spinning it today because nobody seems to be moving. Hang on, somebody's got one going there. So I think this is the end of the cycle. Yep, so that's Skyfall.
On the 28th of September 2016, the Pleasure Beach released plans for a new steel roller coaster that they had entitled Construction 2018, that would be constructed by the German manufacturer Mack Rides at a cost of £16.25 million and would be ready to open in the 2018 season. Construction on the new ride would begin on the 1st of December 2016, and on the 30th of March 2017 the foundations for the ride were about 80% completed, with 282 concrete cylinders driven for main pilings. Due to the conditions of where the ride was to be placed, 8,000 metres of steel tubes and precast concrete piles had been placed 12 metres into the ground, and 5,500 tonnes of soil had been dug out. But on the 10th of April 2017, the park would officially announce the name of their new ride, and they would introduce Icon to the world. Pieces of track for Icon arrived at Blackpool on the 19th of October 2017, a few weeks after the arrival of the first supports, which had arrived on the 29th of September. And the final piece of track for the ride was installed on the 14th of February 2018, with both Amanda and Nick Thompson signing the interior of the steelwork. Icon would open on the 25th of May 2018 and was widely accepted as one of the better coasters in the United Kingdom. The ride itself begins slowly, rolling out of the station to the launch area. Riders can hear an intense build-up with the voiceover saying Icon to mark the 50 miles per hour LSM launch. The launch puts you through a tunnel into an 82-foot high top hat element. The top hat then passes under the Big One's lift hill. This is followed by a shallow non-inverting inclined loop before a series of banked turns, intertwining with the Big Dipper and Steeplechase before turning over Steeplechase's brake run and navigating through a downward barrel roll. After diving into another tunnel, a second LSM launch follows at 53 miles per hour, which goes into a non-inverting 88.5 foot Junior Immelman loop. This is the tallest part of the layout. Then there's a series of highly banked turns, airtime hills, a helix and two S-curves follow, before the train hits the final brake run and re-enters the station. Even though the park had gained a new favourite with Icon, unfortunately in 2018 the park would lose an old favourite too. The Wild Mouse at the Pleasure Beach had ran since 1958 and was held in very high regard as one of the finest and most extreme examples of the Wild Mouse coaster. Unfortunately, after remaining closed for the majority of the 2017 season, the ride was removed indefinitely in January 2018 to make way for future developments.
What are we thinking? Oh god, it's going off now. See you in a bit.
In 2019, the Pleasure Beach would open its second hotel. The Boulevard Hotel was built on the site of the old Star pub, and the hotel would feature 120 ensuite rooms, 2 restaurants and 10 suites. Also in 2019, the Pleasure Beach would reinvent their Halloween season offerings with the brand new Journey to Hell Freak Nights. At the end of 2019, it was also officially announced that Valhalla would be closed for the 2020 season to undertake major redevelopment and refurbishment ready for the park's anniversary year in 2021.
At the end of the 2019 season and its 25th anniversary season, the big one would begin a retracking program, as the ride had started to become a little bit rough on riders, and also to preserve it for the future. And in the final event of 2019, Leonard Thompson was elected to be the chairman of IAAPA, becoming only the 3rd woman in its history to hold its top title and the first woman from Europe. And before we finish the video, here's a list of all the old rides that are no longer at the park, but every one of these rides has had a major part in making the park what it is today. So here we are in 2020, 124 years from when Bean and Outhwaite started the park. It's still here, thrilling its guests and giving people fantastic days out and memories. There's something special about Pleasure Beach. There always has been. It's different from any other park in the country. And personally, it's my favourite park in the UK. There isn't a park in the country that has a feel of history and everything that the Pleasure Beach gives you the minute you walk in through the door. And I hope that goes on for many years to come. So we hope you've enjoyed our history of the Pleasure Beach. I'm sure we've missed lots of stuff off, but hopefully we've managed to catch everything that you enjoy about the Pleasure Beach, same as we do. And all we can say is thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.